Welcome back to the Terps of the Beast Coast. As we discussed last week, we're going to continue discussing, do you prefer the full melt versus the rosin? Now, not to say that we discriminate or we don't like either one. It's just that there's a love for a good resin. And when it comes to good resin, it's always going to be the full melt. I mean, that's the consensus I've been taking, speaking to some of the judges that I do the interview with on Resin Cup. It's just when it comes down to what is it that they love about hash, it's still always going to be the full melt. Now, not to say that there's nothing wrong with rosin, but you know, the debate is what is full melt versus rosin, right? So again, I brought back the 710 extractionist. Nate, how are you today, brother?
Thank you. I'm doing wonderful. I I'm hanging in there. I'm doing my thing. Um, it's been another week of work in the cannabis industry, but I can say that I've thought a lot about our conversation 1 week ago, and I'm very much looking forward to this.
Excellent. Yeah, so we dived into a lot of things, and I felt as though that maybe we'll just jump back into it, but keep it a little fresher as far as what we discussed. Um, the Oklahoma entries were amazing. Peach Marishano, I believe, was the strain that won Noble Extract. So, you
Sorry,
know,
what was the strain that won?
it's a peach Marciano. So it's like a cherries kind of thing, peach with cherries. So I don't know the full definition of it. I should ask him. I don't know what the combines, just the name of it. We don't know what the crosses are behind it, but um, it had a broad range of terpene flavors that the judges, all judges were all like, something different, but still something familiar. Not to say that nothing else was not also as good, but when the score is added up, pretty much the top one was that one, and has been crowned the Oklahoma Hashishian.
Uniquity stands alone.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about peach as far as that go. Have you had any peach hash recently, man?
Peach.
Yeah, like any peach flavored hash.
That's that's funny. So there's a I can't remember if oh shoot. I'm working out of a freezer right now of a number of different strains of fresh frozen, and the peach. I should know this, but again, there are so many different varieties, and these are new crosses that have been done by the gardener that I'm working for. Anyway, it's either a peach pie
Mm.
or uh, or just a Kush variety, like as in like a peach OG or a peach Kush.
There,
Um,
there is
but
a peach pie. Yep.
I will say this: I not being much for flour other than to really just experience maybe a flavor profile, and then also of course with a scope or maybe a test wash, whatever, get some kind of an idea what maybe I can expect from that strain as far as yield, and I have high hopes for this one.
Nice.
Honestly, its flavor profile is so impressive in flower form that it's like it's almost like it can't yield well. and I
Wow.
and I just say that because um, for those of you that for a lot of us that wash or that make hash, period, whether it's in a solvent or solventless variety. In a solventless variety, you're consistently looking for winners or washers, if you will. Um, it's quite the search. And every once in a while, you come across the terpene profile or a strain with a cannabinoid slash terpene profile, whatever it is, that even though it yielded you nothing,
Mm.
it created you, and by nothing, I mean like a 1 or 2% by the time you get to rosin. Um, that hash or hash rosin is so phenomenal that you figure out ways to offset it in your garden, if that makes sense. commercially, of course. If it's your personal thing, then I imagine you figure out ways to offset it with something that will dump so you can get to your next harvest.
Gotcha. So, as far as peach go, um, I've had three resin cups so far, and it's two resin cup winners that had peach in their crosses. So I think peach is gonna finish up the year strong as far as what's coming out in the garden. But it's interesting how when you are the watcher, you kind of get a pulse of what's going to be raging in the market next commercially because that's what comes in more abundance. So, tap in with your local hash maker, man. You might know what's coming without even knowing. So with that
So true.
said, so with that said, let's talk about you know, the full melt again. So understanding that people think that when it comes to full melt there's a lot lost because you're trying just to collect those trichome glandular heads, and when you do that there is generally a lesser time and a lesser wash that's going on because you're just gently trying to just remove and not to really take in any plant material. So with that said, some people feel as though that, when you make full melt, it's a waste. But if you're making rosin, you can go a little harder. And because you're going to filter it anyway, then it doesn't matter. What's your thought on that, man?
Okay. Um, so I guess first, excuse me. uh, Number one, anyone that's ever trying to achieve a full melt is no part of anything that you're doing is a waste. That's artistry. That's craft. Good for you. Um, and that's also why we have 8-bag kits. That you're not expected to pull only full melt. Who the hell is growing only full? Also, I mean, and let's just take one step back. As you were talking about what you're able to get, with solventless extractions, we're looking at that. I'm going to mess up the terminology here, but it's generally like I believe it's either a sessilate or the glandular trichome head that's at the end of a weak neck capitate stalk, which is
Capital.
the stalk with the head on it. You're you in solventless. I can only really grab that head and then further refine that head with my bag system that I'm rinsing through. Hopefully, um, the plant was grown to a full enough term that the micron size of each of those heads is at least uniform enough that one of those bags, like the 120, the 90, the 73, whatever, one of those
Right.
bags will pull close to full melt. And if my rinse tech is on point, then beautiful. But that's that bag. All the other bags, depending. I mean, I personally like to do a test squish of each micron before I combine anything because
Mm,
I don't want to add a 45 into, if I pull the 90 out for melt.
right.
And so then I have, like a 73 to 89. That'd be 120 all the way through 189. And then, of course, 25 to 73. Everything outside, I'm sorry, 25 to 89. If I pull the 90, all those microns outside of that 90 to 119 micron, which we're assuming is the full melt. And so I'm going to
Hmm.
keep that aside because full melt over everything. All these other microns are producing a significant amount of hashish that is, of course, in some cases stocky, and in some cases, sometimes even plant matter can get there, depending on your tech and your material and your equipment, etc. Um, as far as like, we should all be going after the melt in every single case, and in my personal experience, I not only go after the melt, but I go after the melt so that I can get that micron or that specific pool when I find what size heads most are of the glandular trichome heads are. When I find that bag, that's the golden ticket, right? But the the real reason I'm going for that, or not, I mean, the real reason, 50-50, just as much of a reason as for why I'm going for that is because I am going to produce enough hashish outside of that specific melt micron that has a ton of capability, just all sorts of potential to become incredible hash rosin, but it's not the full melt. So in my mind, you should always be going for the full melt, and not just because you want to go for the full melt, because that is the pinnacle of the cannabis experience, in my humble opinion. But you want to be going for the full melt because by doing that, you're going to collect all the other hash. You're going to collect everything else that the plant has to offer. And if it's stalky or planty or whatever, then that's where the next step or some further refinement comes in, whatever it is that you choose to be. Personally, I like to press.
Nice. So at the end of the day, seeking out the full melt or pressing it all, how do you feel? Just say, forget about the full melt, let's just press it all. How do you think about that?
So very, very okay. There are cultivars and strains that you will not be able to produce full melt with an 8-bag system. It is what it is. It's very possible that the only way to produce a full melt from that cultivar would be to dry it, cure it, and then let it experience or whatever properly, have it dry sifted to the point that you've cleaned it up enough that you can then implement static tech to pull up those heads. Because at that point, we're not concerned with size. The static charge will pick up a glandular trichome head and leave stock behind. So within specific cultivars, the 73 doesn't melt quite, even like maybe 5, but I mean, and as I'm sure you will agree, there are parts of the community nationwide that would scream, "Oh my God, I've never even seen anything melt like this." And like maybe you or I would go, "This doesn't even make the 5. It's got to get pressed." But I think more often than not, that's one of two cases. Either the cultivar did not produce a 25 micron, 45 micron, 73 micron, 90 micron, 120 micron, or 160 micron that was full melt. If you get one out of your 190, then you got some heads that I got to see. But anyway, so it's literally the specificity of the cultivar. Or we're not interested in any of that because we are, and I'm speaking on as if I work for the company that would choose to decide this. And that's really the third thing of this. But anyway, we're not in a market where melt would even make a return. There are a lot of places where people just don't understand it and number one, like don't really like have the proper equipment to make sure that they're that they're going to enjoy their melt and not mess.
Right.
Not make sure. They don't even. A lot of people don't even have the necessary education to understand what they're going after, let alone the equipment. So it's like one of two. And then of course the third bracket I would add to that, of course, is economic motivation. As I'm sure you will agree, and maybe I hope most of you, and if this doesn't make sense to you, then you'll just see it. I promise you, I'm not lying. Hash rosin sells much faster than full melt. And now that is not among specific circles. If you're hanging out with me or a terp, you're lucky if you even see that melt. Because those that know, but that's a very small group, and it's it's just generally something that needs to be understood, and it takes time and education. So it's one of two things: either you couldn't achieve the melt, which is totally understandable, or you're not interested in melt. You're pressing rosin because your market doesn't support it, or just very simply, the dollar is what's most important from this run, or
Right.
press, or wash, or etc.
So let's even talk about, like, we got the home end user, and they're thinking about creating something beautiful. So at the end of the day, what is it that you think is the best practice when it comes to doing home washes, as far as, should there be a constant temperature? Should there be a constant humidity? As far as, you know, what steps can we ensure that they can achieve something without, having, because not everyone has a walk-in freezer, right? So, you know, if they're trying to achieve something of that nature, or something of a great quality, what steps can they ensure? Like, what's the ideal water temperature you feel if somebody does not have the full capability?
Oh, okay. So very simpler. You want to keep it below 40 degrees. Um, let's see. We said temperature, and
And humidity, because
so
humidity is a
humidity is
factor.
going to be. This is an insane thing to say, but relatively irrelevant.
Mm.
And by that I mean because at this temperature there is no humidity. There should not be. We're
So
so
just to
close to
think,
freezing. And I'm sorry, I said 40 degrees. What I
40
meant,
degrees.
I realized that's a red light. 34 to 30 degrees, depending on whether or not you're using some sort of mechanical agitation, as in like an Osprey or a stainless steel washing machine, or if
Hmm.
you're just using like a 20-gallon Bubble Magic wash machine, and you got where's my work bag? Shit, it's too far away for me to reach. But anyway, and you got a big, 20-gallon, 220 micron work bag that you have your material moving around in, or your hand washing, whatever it
Hmm.
is. Um, it's you Temperature is so integral because temperature can not only keep humidity from even becoming a factor,
Hmm.
but even more importantly than that, you're weakening, pardon me, that capitate stalk, and allowing that glandular trichrome head to fall into the water. And if
Hmm.
that water is the proper temperature, it will not break. It even hardens a little bit. It'll actually solidify and become strong. And then, with great washer strains, if you will, when you go to collect, it's it's uh, it's a joy to rinse and then scoop up into whatever pan, or whatever your drying technique is, if you're microplaning or whatever.
Right,
But
right.
as far as temperature to humidity to any other factors, we want to dial in temperature. And
And that would create the
real quick,
perfect
I'll shout
environment.
out. I'm going to try and say this properly. Pele Polare, or if you're a white boy, Pele
Cheers.
Polar or Polaire or whatever. Uh, anyway, these guys make some of the highest tech insulation sleeves in the game. They can, if whether you're washing in a 5-gallon bucket
Mm.
or an $8,000 stainless steel Bruteless food safe washing vessel, they got you. Um, so temperature is absolutely integral to keep humidity completely out of it. And then aside, or on top of that, it's it's tech. And by that, I don't mean delicacy or how long you wash or first wash, only 3 minutes.
Mm,
Does not matter. What matters, what really matters, is the water to biomass ratio.
mm,
When you see people that are getting an amount of hash from a 3 minute wash that you just don't even believe is possible, that's because you're not using enough water. You haven't scaled up to the point where you have decided, I'm going to get a bigger vessel. I'm going to get if it's necessary. This is what I think helps keep me young. Is I don't have an Osprey, so I still pick up 20 and 32-gallon trash cans full full of that beautiful gold and lots of water. So when I say tech, I mean understanding of the mechanical separation and the usage of water as a carrier solvent.
mm.
And I'm going to stop there.
Yeah, so I mean, at the end of the day, um, do we talk about when we agitate, right? What about ice? Do you think we need ice, or do we just need to have that water at that desired temperature?
You hit it. And just to expand a little bit, I honestly, when I live in Montana, so there are many months out of the year that I get to wash outside. I can
Right.
literally set things down in 3 and 4 feet of snow, and
Mm.
as long as there are no bags anywhere near you, because you first, if you're beginning or starting out this, do not smoke anything near your bags. As soon as you drop a little cinder, that bag's no longer that bag's like
God,
90 micron all the way up, except for that big
that little
fat
hole.
hole you burn into
Right.
it. Anyway, you can see the advantages to washing outside, but it just, yeah, I'm gonna go on too long on that one. But it's essentially making sure that your your EQs, not grow room EQs, but ECs, environmental conditions, are dialed in.
Mm, that's it. I mean, as far as that go, we already know, and most people should know, the material is gold. If you have the gold material, then everything else kind of just falls into place. So, what I wanted to talk about was, you know, certain terps, right? You know, I don't know. There's certain terps that doesn't translate like after you smell it in the flower. You're like, man, when I wash this, it's just gonna it's just gonna smell so great. And then when you wash it, that flavor, that terpene, that terp is just not the same as it was in the flower. Why does that happen?
Okay, so to be perfectly honest, what other hash makers than I
There we go. You're back.
can,
Uh,
um, what we seem to have come across, and what it there are very specific and very volatile monoterpene profiles that begin to evaporate in the low 70s Fahrenheit.
mm,
So, with that being a detriment to our preservation process, we got to keep things as cold as possible during the wash, regardless of how cold and how efficient. And we got our buddy who owns a Pizza Hut to let us use the walk-in freezer. Everything was -40, whatever you call it, perfect conditions. You still have to dry that hash, and you're going to have to get not anywhere near 70 degrees. But if you're at 55 degrees or 60 degrees at the right humidity, and you're giving it 10 days because you're old school microplaning or drying, you are going to see some terpene conversion. Um,
mm,
very, I'm going to speak on this again with no authority, but I think what is happening here is that the terpene profile is becoming bonded, if you will, or at least I guess molecularly next to making it a terpenoid. Part of this is so we have a cannabinoid profile and a terpenoid profile now, us responsible for the medication or the effect that we're going to feel. So it's it's so cultivar specific, but as soon as you take it off the plant, we've now removed all the biomass, all the heavy chlorophyll leafy material that does a great job, especially when like if with fresh frozen this doesn't matter, but when you see buds that are being hung and dried, you can see the leaves that how they protect the bud and protect the trichomes and keep it from light. So each tiny little step, no matter how small we think it is, and no matter how cold we think we're being, we're still in, let's say, best case scenario, a 40-degree room, and we're moving a paddle around a bucket of ice water and cannabis. You understand it at these specific friction points where the paddle is hitting the bud and maybe moving and making these things spin around. At that exact contact point, we're not maintaining 32 degrees. It's just not possible. And on a microscopic or even a molecular level, over 3 to 5 to 10 to 30 minutes, however, whatever your wash is, or however long you're going, or if it's your 10th wash, whatever. The variables are infinite. But I can tell you, basically, the terpene conversion comes down to the fact that it's near impossible to pull the resin gland with the terpene profile that's coming from that biomass fully intact and isolated as a concentrate. So you really have to. This is why you get into phenotypes, because you look for, let's say, a GMO that smells the way you want it to be. You find a GMO that is maybe a little bit different, but when it washes, here we are. And that may just be as simple as dialing in what week you're pulling this cultivar. It's again, and I'm not a grower, but there are a myriad of variables just on that side of it. And on my side of it, there are infinite variables. So simply put, I can just say that because of miniature or if you will, microclimate, little spots, temperature changes, in those little spots where little temperature changes are happening, conversion is happening.
Nice. So, with that said, looking at how terpenes can really shape how the medicine is gonna, affect the person when they take it on, why is it that, we don't do more of the dry sifting then?
That's a great question, man. We don't do more of that because it's laborious. It's incredibly difficult. It's something that takes. I'm just going to keep it simple on this one. Trial and error.
Trial and error.
It requires trial and error.
Yeah.
With something like BHO, or if you know me, or if you've seen any of my videos and you've caught my business line or any of my emails, you can buy a short path system for very cheap, up to a couple $1,000s, and I'll walk you through how to create some pretty impressive first pass cannabis distillate as far as what you're looking for cartridges. Um, but as but if you let me show you how to pass it a second time, it gets to hilarious as far as the level of purity. Um, these essentially are recipes that I can share with you just like this, digitally. And if you're just willing to do exactly what I'm saying worked for me and then play with it so it works for you, you'll find it. With something like dry sift, thousands of years ago, there were only certain people that were even allowed to handle, even make the hashish. Like it might be the most artistic of the creations of cannabis concentrate, and that's just my humble opinion. But I have spent most of this last week using my screens and dry sifting and teaching someone that's very new to the idea of resin and even growing for resin as opposed to the plant or growing for a pleasant joint or a pleasant flower smoke. Anyway, people are not dry sifting largely in part to the fact that there is no real return on investment for whatever your learning curve is. And for a lot of people, that gets to the point where they give up and say, that wasn't worth it. That's bunk. That's stupid. Because I couldn't understand it. Except they leave out those last couple of words.
Right. Yeah.
So what we need as cannabis aficionados and hash makers is just really a network, more platforms like Future 4200. And I'll leave it at that. If you're not familiar with that website, we can talk about that. But I imagine most of the people that see this have been on future4200.com.
So with that said, the other thing we want to talk about then is back to the old age question of, is rosin better than full melt, or is a full melt better than rosin?
It's gonna come down to opinion or preference. But I can tell you that as far as COA or analytically, COA just stands for Certificate of Analysis. It's the testing results that you get back when you submit flour or hash or anything. It's what tells you how potent your product is, the terpene percentage, how clean it is, all that. Sometimes it's an economical factor that will decide it. What's available and what's available at the price that the consumer can enjoy or get the most out of. But analytically, science and math gives no fucks about your wallet. It just is what it is. You're not going to ever, I say ever, okay, pardon me. In my experience, I have not yet seen anyone better express any cultivar than in true melt form. And if you don't understand that, or if you don't agree with that, then you just need someone to help you, show you how to properly consume it. And by that I mean what temperatures and maybe what methodology to vaporize it with, or to enjoy it.
What is your ideal temperature you feel is for full melt?
It's funny, my full melt temp's actually kind of hot, but I like so I usually set my alarm for like 5:15 so that I'm going in anywhere like 490 to 495. And I know a lot of people that go a lot colder. But I'm
Yeah.
a turd. I like to take big dabs. So I need a little bit of heat in the course.
Yeah. So then, so there's definitely a little bit of a loss of terps when you have it that high, I believe. I think the max sometimes that goes about 450. And that's sometimes pushing it. So, you know, it all depends, right? It all depends on
So
what you're trying to achieve. Like
exactly. And
there's times when I'm just trying to get the flavor of just the terps itself, not even the effect.
that's that's a wonderful point. Um, when I'm going in at 490 or 495, we're going in on a large enough flag that by the time I even have it off the end of the dabber, we've pulled, let's say, just estimating 50 degrees out of the quartz,
Mm.
just from the melting. And then, so why I guess I like that is because I get to experience that like almost pre-combustion profile in the beginning. And of course, as the last of the flag is melting, I'm just getting murdered with the loud, as the kids call it. But what I would call a very accurate representation of the cultivated terpene and cannabinoid profile, which is not something you're going to get from most concentrates. Let's think about just that term, concentrate. We're not generally concentrating all of the good parts. That's usually not scalable, usually not efficient. So um, it's cannabis is no different than any other market, man. It's buyer beware, and that sucks.
No
But
doubt. So, I forgot to do a little in-house cleaning is if you like what you hear tonight, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, comment. You have my channel and then you also have the 710. So just don't forget to, give us a little comment, give us a little share if you enjoyed the conversation tonight. We're going to try to keep coming back and talk about different aspects when it comes to full melt and also other solventless techniques or possibly any solvent techniques because he dabbles in both. Me personally, I am on the water separation side at all times. I may play a little bit with the sift if I feel that the material is sift worthy. It does come down to the cultivar itself. There's not all plant resin falls equally. There are some resins that fall with material. There's some resin that falls without the material, which is the ones that are much easier to play with because when it comes down to dry sift, we're talking about removing any kind of stalk that is attached to the head. So we're trying to just truly collect the heads. And it is a very gentle process. It's not a very heavy process, but it's also a very tedious process, and it should be as respected as, especially when it comes to market. But then again, as you said, the market is so much an ROI. No one's even bringing it to market anymore. But with the flavor of full melt, I think that, there is a possibility we can still have it on the market, but it's just a matter of, again, the aesthetics, right? When people say that, it leaves a charring on my banger, and things of that nature, or the burn off at the end is something that turns them off just because, there's some kind of lipids that are still there. So you kind of have that kind of burn off that happens regardless when it comes to full melt versus when you put these said material into the rosin bag, it captures most of the material. So we get this more, mimic of a solvent, but it's still solventless. So, and then we also can get into mechanical separation, right? Which is now like the other thing where we're actually trying to keep the material to a certain point, even though it may still have some of the stocks in it, but then it's now something else of a different kind of material that we're now enjoying. Um, how do you feel about that? in regards to the mechanical separation and making THCA.
That that's awesome because when you mentioned mechanical separation, my first thought was just basically that we're talking about making water hash, which is a mechanical separation of its own because water is not technically the salt. Water is a carrier solvent in bubble hash or in ice water hash, meaning that it's carrying the resin head. It's not dissolving it the way that butane or
100%.
hydrocarbons do. Mechanical separation, as in solventless THCA, solventless
Yeah.
terp profile, something that you do on the rosin press. Honestly, I, if I start to tell you how I feel about it, I'm gonna launch into such a diatribe. You're gonna have to like wave me out of it. So I'll just tell you now. If you're ever interested, I am more than willing to bring the press over here to the table and set it up and bring some quality buttered material. And we can, I mean, it would be a long stream because it could take between 90 to even 2.5 hours to be fully completed. But I have no qualms with streaming and sharing that process. And
Let's
by
do
that,
it.
I mean, in the beginning, getting up to the point where you're even starting to collect your terpene profile.
Hmm.
Next, causing the chemical reaction that creates or makes the THCA solidify into its isolate that it will become. And then what and how slowly and how delicately you collect the rest of the bulk of the terpene fraction off of that until we get to the point where we have to waste what we have to waste to get down to nine, like pure THCA.
For
Some of
sure.
the, I think the weakest solventless THCA that I've had tested was 99.7.
Mm.
But some of the strongest, the lab actually called me and said that they were getting results that were like 100.03%
Nice.
because there's a variable, So, but anyway, that stuff ended up being clocked at 99.97. So it doesn't get much purer than that. And when you take a chunk of that and dip it into whatever flavor you prefer, you if you can handle it, you might mechanical separation might be your bag. But
No doubt. Yeah,
but
let
again, oh sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say let's do it. Let's do that for next week, as far as I go. We're gonna keep it going because I think that the information right now, there's there's a lot of information that I think we just need to pour out and let people get at it because why charge like these crazy fees? I don't know. So, you know,
I I fully agree with you. I will say on the half of being the owner of a consultant business, um, I do absolutely share. For any of you that see this, and for any of you that are watching this on my channel, we all are very aware of how open source I am. But that's because I'm willing to post the recipe to my barbecue sauce. I'm sure that you will not go through what it takes to make it. So if you want to get to that result, then you hire me and I'll walk you through it. Um, Having said that, I am so pleasantly surprised when someone not only achieves but surpasses whatever it is that I've laid out or even suggested, and then has something to share with me. That's the real beauty of this industry. Um,
yeah, man,
as
definitely.
Yeah, as someone who's like pledged to the hash and a student of chemistry, there is no end.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, like you said, you can always show somebody the recipe, but if they're not the chef with the love behind the recipe, you'll never able to create the same thing. So I
Exactly.
understand, like, and if anybody asks me, I normally, I give them, I give them the information. I mean, at the end of the day, I understand, there's a business that also is on the other side, but like I said, showing it sometimes, some people might get maybe 50%, some people might get 30%, some might get 80%, but they're gonna still, if they want to get the full of it, they're gonna reach out to you, or they might, find somebody else. But at the end of the day, they're still gonna have to inquire with somebody to get through it because, you
At
know,
the end of the day, it's a percentage.
yeah,
It's
that's
not
it.
whole. It's not one. Um,
Yeah,
no, but you're absolutely right, and that's again, it's it's not that I think anyone has any less ability than me. Most probably have more. I've live streamed this mechanical separation process on YouTube and on Instagram at least a half a dozen times each. And then what's hilarious is in that archived live stream, I'll have very simple mechanical questions about what they could obviously just watch and see. And so
heck,
it just comes down to dedication. And that's why the
no
guys
doubt.
that pick up 80% of what they're watching are really, really exciting because when they seek someone else out or figure the other 20 out themselves and put a little something on top of it, a little chili pea, shout out Breaking Bad,
So
whatever it is.
it creates a whole new system that you sit back and go, huh, they brought it to the next level, and that's what we need is evolution within the industry itself, like we discussed with the other, the technique that you mentioned in regards to how we can store rosin a different way. But
Sure.
you know, it's evolution because that's how things go. I mean, traditionally, we're no longer sitting there with a fucking drill on a paddle, stirring in a fucking 20-gallon bucket. We're now able to put things in a stainless steel. So things are moving along, and with that said, we also have to move with the ideology of how things can be processed, and that takes the next generation and the next generation. You know,
That's so true. That's so funny that you just described. It's what May. So yeah, less than a year ago, I was literally doing exactly what you just described. But uh, it, I was pulling all the bags to see if I could get maybe something worth pressing. But the real venture was to make food grade or just some high quality bubble hash for edibles. Um, so I was running that paint mixer on the drill, not being nice to it at all.
nah. I mean, when I tried that out at first, the two ice, I was like, this is not the way. And then I did the spoon technique, and I said that's still not the way. And it's you go back and forth and you find what you like. I mean, to the end of this day, stainless steel is still something that I feel, if done right, is the way. And then, the machine tech, if you got the right machining, you got the right speed, things can be beautiful. You know, so
If you have the
it
resources to dial in those techniques, you're going to be king of your crew.
no doubt, no doubt. So with that said, the housekeeping fee again. Don't forget to share, like, comment, subscribe. Let people know, if you enjoyed this or not. And as far as I go, do you have anything else to say before we wrap up?
No, just that I'm very much enjoying this. What would we call it? Can we call it a salon, a hash salon?
Well, we could call it a hash, just chopping it, man. At the end of the day, it's like, what is full milk? What is resin? What is rosin? You know?
Absolutely. And I honestly, I'm happy to be a part of someone who's trying to not only differentiate those categories, but explain them in a way that makes it so that whether you're a connoisseur or a weekend warrior, you can get the most out of your cannabis experience, recreational or medicinal.
Definitely. All right. So, Turp Nation, it's been a pleasure. We're going to catch you next week where we're going to probably get into this mechanical separation. Hey, if you have any topics that you want us to talk about when it comes to, bubble hash versus rosin, put it below so we can know what's going on. And with that, we'll see you on the next Terps of the Beast Coast.